Hi, I'm Carrie, and this is So Darn Fun, a channel about quality clothing alterations, pattern reviews, and useful sewing how-tos. Today, I have a dress the wearer cannot get it zipped, so we've got a dilemma here. There's no way to take out any seams. One of the solutions is loops and laces. I'm going to reveal my secret technique next. But before we hit the table and start plucking out this zipper, I have to give credit where credit is due. This technique actually comes from my former boss by the name of Cheryl, who searched to try to find a place where she could buy the nice sturdy satin loops that you see on ready-made wedding dresses and such, and she couldn't find any. So she came up with a method on how to create these using rat tail lace. Let me show you what that is. Okay, using rat tail lacing like this. I'll reveal how we used to do this at Cheryl's storefront shop and how I do it in my own studio today. But first, we need to pluck out this zipper. And there's also, let me move the camera. One of the issues with this, the back buckled right here. So I've got to take a little tuck in here to kind of shorten this back waist area, because obviously the dress was too long for the wearer of this dress. So we're gonna take a little tuck back here while we do this entire process. The first step is to get the zipper out. See you at the table. Before I get to plucking out this zipper, remember this back waist tuck that I needed to take. I had a safety pin in both sides. I took the safety pin out of this left side here and just measure what this gap is right here. It's about 1.5 inches. Right along the waist, there's a waist seam right there. And I'll just make note of this. That way I don't have to keep these pins in. I've got the zipper completely out now, and on this side here, I'm working on lifting these little appliques. Might take a little bit of work to pluck this out, but I need to lift them up off of the fabric so that I can take that little tuck here in the waist seam. Now you might not have known that a lot of these lace fabrics, not all, but a lot of them have appliques that are sewed on, and you can actually carefully remove them to do alterations underneath them. So let me work on getting this loosened enough so that I can take in this back waist seam. I'm having a really hard time seeing where the thread is for this portion of the applique. So I think what I want to do is separate the lace tooling from the lining here so that I can actually get underneath it to see if I can see stitches that are along the bottom. So let's pull this back real quick. There, see, now I can get in between these layers. Sometimes it's easier if you can see where the stitches are on the back. Oops, let's get up here. And it looks like they've just used that nice see-through plasticky nylon thread, so I can't see a thing. I'm probably gonna have to get my jeweler's loop out and get a really close look at this. So something like this. This one's all dusty. There's nothing worse than black on black. It is hard to see. So I have this little applique plucked off till this point right here. And I don't really need to go on plucking the rest of this off. So one little handy trick that you can do, when you reach the point of a little applique where it gets narrow like this, and this happens to be at the end of a leaf, just clip it. There. So when we take this in, and we put that applique back down, it can just overlap on the top of that and it will be just fine. So that's the plan. Let me go ahead and pluck out the one in the same area on this other side. And I don't want to spend too much time showcasing this part because this really isn't what this video is about. This is about the loops and laces, but this just happens to be one of the hurdles that we need to get through for this particular dress so we can put the loops and laces in. So, all right, the appliques are lifted, and now I get to mark this waist seam, and we've got this lining of the skirt here we are also going to deal with at the same time. We can just do all these layers at once. The lining, you can see it, the skirt lining, the bodice, and the main skirt layers right here. So we need to take in this back waist about 3/4 of an inch. So I'll put a pin to show you approximately where I'm going to be stitching. This is about 3/4 of an inch. I'm going to angle it down toward the waist seam. You can see angling like this, and then from the right side of the fabric it will look like this. It angles toward this boning right here, and then this is where it basically lets out to the original seam line here. Then it starts to pinch in here. So I'm going to sew all those layers at once, and then when I'm done I can come back and lay this applique back on top. All right, here is that waist seam with the approximate sewing line very bumpily marked out in my chalk. Let's sew this. Yep, that's exactly what I wanted. And then this applique will go back over here. So now that I've got the appliques along the back edge sewn down, I need to measure this opening so we can start making our loops and lace contraption. From the bottom of the opening in the back and up to the top edge is 12 inches. So we'll keep that number in mind for the next step. So I've got this nice roll of black, it's a bias tape that's already folded in on the edges. It would be the same as getting a double fold bias, which I would recommend. And if you don't have a bias, you can go ahead and use like a strip of satin. I don't know if it matters if it's actually on the bias or not. So if you have satin, you can just go ahead and maybe try it on the straight grain. So we need 12 inches from the finished top of that dress to the bottom of where the zipper used to be, and we need a little bit of seam allowance on either end. So just to make sure that we have plenty, I'll go ahead and cut it at 14 inches, which is this mark right here. But I need 2 of them, so let's do 2. Been rolled up in this roll for a while, so it's a little wavy, but we're going to press that out. So I'm going to press that out with my iron, and then I'm going to fold it in half like this, and then I'll be right back. Here's my pressed strips, and I went ahead and on one end of each of these pressed under that end, about 3/8 of an inch, just on one end for now. That's going to be the top edge of my loops and laces, and you're wondering what these things are. Well, let me just kind of give you a little bit of a visual. This is where we are going to encase our black rat tail, and it's going to make loops like this. So what we need to do now is measure how many of those loops that we are going to need, and this is our formula. We need to make 3/4 inch marks all the way down. So let's mark these at the same time to make sure we get the marks in the same places on both of them. We're going to mark them at 3/4 inch intervals. Let's see if we can get a mark on both of them at the same time. There we go. Now let's count how many loops we're going to need. So we'll do a loop that starts here, circles around, and ends right at the top of that white mark. So that would be basically 1, 2, 3,
4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17.
loops per side. So we need 34 little pieces of rat tail. Each piece of rat tail is 2 inches. I like to use a rotary cutter. Use your rotary cutter with care. Don't get your fingers in the way. Okay, I won't bore you with this. We'll be back. 33, 34. Woo! There's our pile of 34. Let's go to the machine where we will sew these in and placing them as we sew them, so no need to pin. See you over there. I have my machine threaded with black thread and my stitch length is 2.5 so I can get a nice tight little stitch. And I'm going to use some tweezers here. That way I can get the end of this little rat tail all the way back into the fold here. And the first one I'm going to put inside the little seam allowance that I folded so that it's kind of pocketed in there. And we're going to start like this, near the edge. When I near that white line, I'm going to grab the rat tail and I'm going to push it in there. I can feel that it's right there in the, right next to the fold, and it's also just to that side, just right before that white line. And guess what? I'm going to take another one and put it right next to it so that it falls to my side of the white line. But really, you know, they're next to each other. You get the idea here. And then sew over both of them. There we go. And the same with this. This looks tedious, but it's really not. Actually, when you get going, it goes pretty quickly. It's kind of fun. And I'm just stitching probably 1/8 of an inch from the edge here, just close, but so that I get both layers. We're going to be stitching several stitches out further into this bias tape to really nail down these rat tails so that there's no possibility of them pulling out. We want them nice and sturdy. So I'm just gonna fast forward this as I finish the rest of this tape. Here's what my loops look like, all done. Take note of the 3 lines of stitching in the bias area that I did not show. Now I'm just going to steam away that chalk mark that I've got on there. Those are going to be nice and sturdy. Before we sew the loops onto the back edges of this opening here, we notice that because I took the tuck at the waist seam, the skirt portions, which are kind of at the upper end here of the screen because the dress is kind of facing upside down, are uneven with the bodice. So all I want to do is just even that out a little bit. I'm going to eyeball it. I have the layers in the skirt all basted together. So we just sort of even it out like that. That'll work. I want to explain that this dress, when it fit its wearer, had a lot of gap at the top, which is going to be great for loops and laces. Now, if you're doing a dress and there's only like a little bit of gap and you're just trying to kind of ease a little bit more room, once you crank those laces tight, these are going to come closer together, and a loops and laces application looks much better if it kind of V's down toward the waist. So if there's not going to be enough at the top to provide an opening, then just fold back some of it like this on both sides so that you get a nice gap at the top. I would say probably a 3-inch gap is a good gap. maybe more. Just keep that in mind when you're doing this type of a alteration. So take your lace, one of them, make sure that you've got the nice folded in edges at the top, and we're going to pin them on this way. So that nice folded edge of your loops are going to be toward the raw edge of the bodice. And just start pinning it on. Just in case you need the visual, this will be folded back and will look like that. So I'm just pinning this on, getting ready to sew it on. When you get to the bottom of this, it's going to V right there. Now I have all the layers basted together facing the same way. Originally the skirt lining, there were no raw edges showing. It had been turned in, but I am turning them out because it'll just be easier. So therefore, you'll know what I'm talking about if you're facing this issue. I had to make a couple clips at the bottom. If you can see, maybe it looks kind of messy. That will enable these layers to flip out and then to be able to turn back. If I didn't clip them, the fabric would just be twisting and it would be really, really hard to do. So making those little clips, the clips that go all the way to the stitching line. And so when we get to the bottom here, we have like one extra loop. We're just going to go ahead and leave that on there for now. It'll just turn to the inside like that. So there's one side. Let's also pin the other side on, making sure that our loops are going to be matching at the right place across from each other. Just want to hold these together and see if they match up at the top edge and at the waistline particularly. Kind of making sure that it's a one-to-one loops. So if they're not lined up, then just unpin it and kind of ease it whichever way it needs to go so that the loops are in the right place, exactly opposite of each other as much as possible. Really, when it's laced up, they might get a little bit, as my grandmother would say, ink yonk. Let me know if you've ever heard that term before. My husband thought I was crazy the first time I ever used that term. There we go. That looks like it matches pretty well. So let's go to the machine and stitch these babies on there. My first line of stitching is going to be just a scant 1/4 inch away first of all. We'll do a couple lines of stitching. This will just be my first one right here. P.S. It's much easier if you anticipate which way you're going to sew and you put your pins in accordingly. Mine are backwards, but I'll just deal with it for now. Okay, we got the first line of stitching done, and if we were to fold it back right now, we would have this revealed, and we don't want that. So we're going to take another line of stitching very close to these loops, and then we'll do one more. Take a look, pretty close, but not close enough. So this time what we're going to do is we are going to sew pretty much just over the satin loop portion, just missing the bias tape, because we want those loops to be the thing that is kind of hanging on to the rest of the fabric there. So when you turn it right side out, none of that bias stuff is showing. I'm going to back stitch on this one, just off the edge. It appears that we probably have extra loops on the bottom here. So we're just gonna snip them off so they don't get in the way. There's one side, here's the other. I know it looks kind of like a hairy mess down here, but it won't be when we're finished. So here's our V at the bottom right here, and I've got these turned to the inside. And what I'm going to do is on each side, I'm going to stitch 1/4 inch away from the edge, just top stitch all the way up to secure it down. I have a lot of layers going on here, so I want to be careful that I don't break my needle. Now, if you want to kind of finish off these two pieces of extra bias that sticks down at the bottom, you can just cut them off at the same length. And then I have cut and pressed a little piece of bias here that I can just wrap around the bottom edge, kind of like you would at the bottom of a zipper maybe. And I'll just stitch that on just to make it look finished on the inside. And there we go. So I'm going to make just a small little Modesty panel for the lower portion of those loops and laces because that opening goes down quite far. What I have here is a Modesty panel that was taken off of a formal dress, and I'm just going to use the bottom portion of it. So I just wanted to show you a little bit of what a good Modesty panel looks like. It has boning all around the edges, and also some structure, some boning that will go across the middle if it's a long one like this. And it's good to see that this one was a nicely made one. So when it was put in the dress, this boning helps push it out and keep its shape so it doesn't scrumple up when it's being worn. But I'm just going to use this lower portion. And as I look at how this is made, they just basically sandwiched two pieces together that were pressed exactly the same size. I usually make them putting two right sides together and then turning them right side up. But this one wasn't done that way. I've already shortened the boning on these sides here. I'm just going to leave them there. And I have my own boning where I'm going to add it to this inside between the layers along the top. So first what I'm going to do is I'm going to press in this upper edge front and back. Then I'm going to slide my boning in between these layers and just top stitch it all together along this upper edge. And I think that's going to be totally fine for the small portion of the Modesty panel that is just going to go in the lower part of this loops and laces. So here's my little mini Modesty panel. I've got a piece of boning I've cut, and I'm tucking it into that folded over layer right there. It's all sandwiched in there, nice and snug. And I'm going to start stitching on the edge here through the boning. I'm going to turn the corner here and come down to, there's an existing line of stitching right here, and I think I'm just going to make it come down there so it looks like it's part of the original, and tie it off. I think I'm going to pick up this one. I'm going to go all the way to the top, and then I'm just going to kind of crisscross it down. Now I'm going to come in and stitch a little channel right there. I might catch some of that boning along the way, or maybe not. We'll see. At least it'll be in there. It won't move anywhere. Now let's clip all these threads. Looks like it's growing whiskers here. All right, I'm going to go tack this in to the dress, and then we'll have a peek. Here's what our loop treatment looks like so far on the dress form. It's a nice long opening, and for this gal, She requested just a little teeny tiny Modesty panel just for the lower back, but right now we're going to talk about those laces. Depending on how long of an opening you have will determine how long you want to make the laces. I don't think I've ever gone wrong with making 3 yards, so that's what I'm going to reach for today, is we'll make 3 yards of laces, and that should be plenty for this dress. I cut my strips 2 inches wide, and this lacing will have to be pieced together because I don't have a straight 3-yard piece. I'm going to use this nice selvage edge here. I've got a nice silk taffeta left over from another project, so I'm going to use this. It's going to make a great lace, and I want to cut it lengthwise because I believe that if you use satin, which you can use, the smoothness would go this way and it would be easier to lace through the laces. It won't catch up on those loops. So lengthwise might also be stronger in the way that it's woven. All right, now I need to sew these together. I'm not going to get fancy with it by doing the diagonal thing that you see. I'm just going to do a regular seam like that. First of all, you see I sewed my seam there and I pressed it open. Now what I'm going to do is press this whole length in half lengthwise, like this, all the way down. There, now that you've mastered pressing 3 yards of a 2-inch strip in half, now this is what we're going to do. We're going to fold each half into that pressed middle. This takes a little bit of practice, a little bit of dexterity, and it doesn't have to be perfect. It's just a lace and it's going to scrunch up when it goes through those loops anyhow. So you're going to end up with approximately a half an inch wide lacing strip. This will take a little bit longer than the previous step. I'd like to interject here. The reason that we do these laces on the straight of grain is because if you've noticed, if you've ever had a lace up that was bought from the store, they are always, I don't know if I've ever seen one that wasn't done with bias laces. And as we know, the bias is a little stretchy, and so once you get that dress laced up and wear it for a while, it might tend to feel like it's loosening up because those bias lacings are pulling and actually stretching out. So when you do it on the straight of grain, when you lace yourself up into it, it's pretty much going to stay put. Plus you're not going to have the stitches popping out. I can't tell you how many times I've had to repair laces that are cut on the bias where they have pulled so hard that the stitching starts to pop out. And then you've got all these fuzzy pieces that are sticking out from the seam here. Here's the end, one of the ends of the lace, and I want the end to be pointy. I want both ends to be pointy. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to turn it right sides together so it's kind of like a W. See? Kind of like a W. And I'm going to do a diagonal line from what's going to be the tip to the edges. So let's try this. There we go. That's good enough because that'll just make it easier to lace through those loops. Let's do that to the other end too. Now, when that's done, we have this open edge. We're just going to top stitch that closed. Just as close to the edge, making sure you catch both layers. Now we look and see if there's any places we missed, and if there is, we just go back over the top of it. This is a function issue, not an aesthetic issue. That's really close right there. So I'm just gonna go over the top of that. All better. Let's keep checking. Yeah, that was the only spot. All right, okay, laces are done. Let's get her laced up. And here we have our finished product. Nicely applied loops and laces. I've only got them laced partway down so that I could show you this little bitty Modesty panel that I just have in the lower half here. It is tacked in on the left side and just left free floating on the right side. That way when it's laced all the way up, it's going to be pretty tight against her body and it won't be moving anywhere. Now these loops are very, very secure. When this is on the body, these could be pulled and yanked pretty tightly. They're just not going to go anywhere. I didn't cover the construction of the Modesty panel. I just showed kind of an overview of what a pre-existing one looked like and how I altered it. I wasn't planning on doing a video showing how to do one, but if you need to know how to do it, please leave a comment and just let me know, and I'll be sure and get a video together for you so that you can see exactly how to make one. It might be self-explanatory for you, I don't know. But anyway, if you need to do this, just rewatch this video and all the details are in there for you. And hopefully you'll be able to get a nice corset lace-up closure on the dress that you're working on. Thank you for watching. I hope that there was something that you gleaned from today. And please don't forget to like and subscribe and leave me a comment, ask me a question, and I will see you in the next video.